python of this size would be quite the voracious predator out here in the Everglades. And what people really worry about.
But local biologists say it's necessary.
Working to help balance that ecosystem back out by reintroducing these eastern indigo snakes.
When Florida announced a bizarre plan to release thousands of snake-killing creatures into the wild, critics instantly mocked the idea as desperate, reckless, and completely absurd. Social media exploded with jokes. Experts raised concerns, and many believed the state had finally lost control of its deadly python crisis. But months later, something unbelievable started happening deep inside the Everglades. The results were so shocking that even longtime skeptics were left speechless. So, what exactly did Florida unleash into the swamps? And how did this controversial experiment become one of the most unexpected wildlife victories in recent history? Guardians of Everglades. For thousands of years, the vast wetlands of the Florida Everglades have been home to many different kinds of native snakes. These reptiles are not invaders or unwanted creatures. They are an important part of the Everglades and help the ecosystem survive and remain healthy. Long before the arrival of the massive Burmese python, Florida's native snakes quietly carried out important jobs that kept nature balanced. Many of these snakes feed on rats, mice, and other small animals that can quickly multiply if left unchecked. By controlling rodent populations, native snakes help protect plants, preserve habitats, and support the survival of other wildlife in the wetlands. They also serve as food for larger predators, making them a key part of the Everglades food chain. Without them, the natural balance of the region could begin to fall apart. Even though native snakes play such a valuable role, they are often feared and misunderstood. Many people see all snakes as dangerous, but the truth is very different. A large number of Florida's native snake species are harmless to humans and usually avoid contact whenever possible. Most would rather hide or escape than attack. Still, because of fear and confusion, innocent native snakes are sometimes mistaken for dangerous invaders. This is one reason why the Florida Python Challenge places such strong importance on protecting native snake species. While the competition encourages people to remove invasive Burmese pythons from the Everglades, organizers make it absolutely clear that native snakes must never be harmed. Participants are carefully trained before entering the challenge. They learn how to identify Burmese pythons and how to tell them apart from Florida's local snakes.
Biologists at the Conservancy of Southwest Florida believe one of their scout Burmese python.
The training is strict because mistakes could harm native Everglades species. Organizers stress the protection of local snakes and penalize anyone who removes them. The focus is only on Burmese pythons, an invasive species introduced through the pet trade that now threatens wildlife by heavily preying on native mammals, birds, and reptiles. Today, the mission to remove invasive pythons is about far more than eliminating a dangerous predator. It is part of a much larger effort to defend the Everglades itself and protect the wildlife that truly belongs there. That includes Florida's remarkable native snakes, which have quietly helped keep the wetlands alive for generations. But what threatened the existence of Florida's wildlife? How did it all begin? Let's delve into the details of the day Florida's wilderness began to die. Everglades under siege. For centuries, the Florida Everglades seemed untouched, a vast wetland where nature dominated. Birds, alligators, deer, and hidden predators lived in a delicate balance. The ecosystem stretched endlessly, thriving quietly and naturally, with humans barely aware of how fragile and interconnected this remarkable wilderness truly was in reality over time. The Everglades were not just beautiful scenery. They were alive in every sense of the word. Every sound, every movement, every creature had a role. Raccoons searched the swamps for food. Bobcats hunted silently at dusk. Marsh rabbits darted through the reeds. Frogs croaked through the night, while fish and insects filled the waters below. Together, this enormous ecosystem supported tourism, fishing, water purification, flood control, and wildlife worth billions of dollars every single year. It looked eternal, But nature sometimes collapses quietly. The beginning of Florida's ecological nightmare did not arrive with explosions, fire, or dramatic warning sirens. Instead, it slipped in almost unnoticed. In 1992, Hurricane Andrew tore through southern Florida with terrifying force. Homes were flattened, communities were devastated, and among the destruction, a reptile breeding facility near Miami was damaged. Exotic snakes escaped into the nearby wilderness. At the same time, something else was happening. Pet owners across Florida were releasing Burmese pythons into the wild. Many had bought the snakes when they were small, harmless-looking pets. But Burmese pythons do not stay small. Some grow longer than a car and strong enough to overpower deer and alligators. Unable to care for them anymore, owners simply let them go, believing nature would somehow handle the problem. Nature did handle it, just not in the way anyone expected. The Everglades turned out to be paradise for Burmese pythons. The warm climate matched their natural tropical habitat perfectly. The wetlands gave them endless hiding places, and food was available everywhere. Birds, rabbits, raccoons, deer, frogs, and even alligators became prey. Worse still, Florida had almost no natural predators capable of stopping them. The snakes multiplied with terrifying speed. A single female python could lay close to 100 eggs at once. Hidden beneath thick vegetation, thousands of young snakes survived and spread across the wetlands unnoticed. What began as a handful of escaped and abandoned reptiles slowly transformed into one of the most destructive invasive species crises in modern history.
Check that out, huh? So wild Burmese python here in the Everglades?
Then came the silence. Researchers began noticing something deeply disturbing. Animals that had once been common throughout the Everglades were disappearing. Raccoon populations crashed by over 99%. Opossums nearly vanished. Bobcat sightings dropped dramatically. Marsh rabbits became rare. And in some areas, deer sightings fell by more than 90%. The Everglades were slowly collapsing without obvious warning signs, as native wildlife declined unnoticed. Meanwhile, invasive Burmese pythons grew massive and increasingly dominant, even overpowering alligators. What was once a balanced ecosystem had quietly shifted into an occupied landscape controlled by a powerful and destructive invading species. So, how did Florida take control of the situation? What was the first move? Let's dive into the details of Florida's desperate war against an invisible enemy. Ecosystem under siege. At first, Florida believed the invasion could be stopped. Officials launched hunting programs, hired professional snake trackers, and encouraged the public to help remove pythons from the wild. Soon, the famous Florida Python Challenge was created, a massive event where hunters from across America entered the Everglades armed with traps, flashlights, and snake hooks. To the outside world, it looked exciting, almost heroic. People celebrated every captured python as if victory was close. But behind the headlines was a frightening truth. The hunters were losing badly. Even when hundreds of snakes were removed, the overall population barely changed. Experts estimated that somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000 Burmese pythons might still be hiding throughout South Florida. Capturing a few hundred snakes each year was like trying to drain the ocean with a bucket. So Florida turned toward technology. Scientists designed robotic rabbits that released heat and scent to lure hungry pythons out of hiding. Drone teams flew above the wetlands searching for movement. Specially trained dogs sniffed through the swamps tracking reptile scent trails. Researchers even attached tracking devices to live snakes and released them again, hoping the scout snakes would lead them to breeding females hidden deep in the marshes.
Scientists have deployed 120 robot rabbits. Yeah, they're designed to look, move, and even smell like real marsh rabbits.
It became a strange modern war between science and nature nature kept winning. Every removed python seemed to be replaced by 10 more. The snakes adapted quickly, spreading farther north into new habitats. Hunters worked harder each year, yet the invasion continued growing. Then scientists discovered something even more horrifying hiding inside the pythons themselves. The snakes had brought parasites from Asia. One parasite in particular, the snake lungworm, began spreading through Florida's ecosystem like an invisible plague. The parasite's eggs entered the wetlands through python waste. Cockroaches fed on the contaminated material. Lizards and frogs ate the cockroaches. Native snakes then consumed those animals, unknowingly infecting themselves. Inside the snakes' bodies, the parasites attacked the lungs. The effects were gruesome. Infected snakes struggled to breathe, developed severe lung damage, weakened slowly, and often starved because they could no longer hunt properly. Researchers discovered native snakes suffering from pneumonia, tissue damage, and heavy infestations of worms. Suddenly, Florida's problem was no longer just giant snakes. The invasion had evolved into an ecological disease. At least 18 native snake species became infected, and scientists feared the parasite might remain in Florida permanently, even if every python disappeared tomorrow. That realization changed everything. The state was no longer fighting a single predator. It was fighting a collapsing ecosystem. What solution did Florida present to the problem? How did people see the solution? Let's dive into the details of the plan that made the entire internet laugh. Mocked restoration plan. As the situation in Florida's wild landscapes became more severe, especially in the Everglades, officials announced a solution that sounded so unusual that it quickly caught global attention for all the wrong reasons. The plan was simple on paper, but shocking in public reaction. Release hundreds of eastern indigo snakes back into the wild. The response was almost instant. Across social media, people reacted with disbelief and humor. Memes spread rapidly. News headlines turned the announcement into a punchline, and commentators everywhere asked the same confused question. If Florida was already struggling with too many snakes, why would it deliberately add more? To many outside observers, the idea sounded like chaos dressed up as science. The phrase, "fighting snakes with snakes," became a joke that traveled far and wide. Some compared it to past environmental mistakes, where introducing new species had led to even bigger ecological problems. Others wondered aloud whether the state had made a decision based more on desperation than logic. But behind the laughter was a truth that most people did not know. The eastern indigo snake was not an intruder. It was a native species, one that belonged deeply to the land. Long before invasive Burmese pythons began spreading through Florida's wetlands, eastern indigo snakes had already been a powerful presence across the southeastern United States. They were among the top natural predators in the region's ecosystem. With their striking, glossy, blue-black skin and length that could reach nearly 9 feet, they were both beautiful and formidable. Unlike many feared reptiles, indigo snakes were not dangerous to humans. They had no venom, no aggression toward people, and were known to avoid human contact whenever possible. Calm in behavior but highly effective hunters, they played a vital ecological role. They fed on rats, frogs, lizards, birds, and even other snakes. Most importantly, they were one of the few animals capable of hunting venomous species such as rattlesnakes and cottonmouths. Remarkably, they could do this safely due to a natural resistance to certain snake venoms, making them uniquely suited for controlling dangerous populations that other predators avoided. In many ways, they functioned as nature's built-in system for balancing snake populations. However, human expansion disrupted everything. Over decades, forests were cleared for farming, towns grew, and natural habitats were broken apart. The longleaf pine ecosystems and underground burrows the indigos depended on began to disappear. Their numbers fell sharply, and by the late 20th century, they were officially classified as a threatened species. Conservationists did not give up. For years, scientists worked quietly but carefully to bring them back. They bred indigo snakes in protected environments, restored damaged habitats, and safeguarded the burrows of gopher tortoises, which indigos relied on for shelter and survival. What many people saw as a sudden or strange idea was actually the result of decades of patient ecological planning. This was not a random intervention. It was repaired. Florida was not carelessly releasing snakes into the wild. It was attempting to restore a balance that human activity had once broken. And as time passed, something remarkable began to unfold. Nature, in its quiet way, began to respond. How did nature respond? What exactly happened? Let's take a look at the moment when nature began fighting back. Nature strikes back. For almost 20 years, Burmese pythons seemed like an unstoppable force in Florida's Everglades. After being introduced into the wild, they slowly spread across the wetlands and settled at the very top of the food chain. With no natural enemies strong enough to control them, they multiplied quietly and steadily. Native animals, such as raccoons, rabbits, opossums, and even deer, began to vanish in many areas. The changes were not loud or dramatic at first. Instead, they happened slowly, almost invisibly, as the giant snakes moved through the marshes like silent rulers of a changing kingdom. Scientists who studied the Everglades grew increasingly worried. Some even feared that the ecosystem might never return to its natural balance again. Then, something surprising happened, something few expected. Deep in the wetlands, researchers tracking a large 13-foot Burmese python found the snake dead. Its body was intact, but its head had been badly damaged, showing signs of a fierce struggle. At first, no one knew what could have caused such an event. The answer came later, when hidden trail cameras revealed the truth. The killer was a bobcat. This discovery shocked wildlife experts across Florida. A small native predator, weighing barely 25 pounds, had managed to kill a python more than twice its length. It seemed almost unbelievable, yet it was real. For many scientists, it marked an important turning point. It suggested that the Everglades were not completely defeated. They were slowly learning to respond. And this was only the beginning of a larger shift. More surprising observations followed. Alligators were seen feeding on younger pythons. Florida panthers began confronting the invasive snakes in rare encounters. Even eastern indigo snakes, once thought too vulnerable to survive such competition, were recorded hunting young pythons in the wild. Step by step, Florida's native wildlife was adjusting, adapting, and pushing back. Of course, the damage was far from reversed. Thousands of Burmese pythons still remained hidden in thick marshes, and many native species had already suffered major losses. But for the first time in years, the balance was not moving in only one direction. It was beginning, slowly and carefully, to shift. Then came another powerful sign of hope. In 2023, conservation teams monitoring restoration areas in northern Florida recorded something extraordinary. Wild-born baby eastern indigo snakes were discovered living and growing naturally in the restored habitats. This was a historic breakthrough. For nearly 50 years, these snakes had struggled to rebuild stable populations in the wild. Scientists had spent decades breeding them in controlled environments and releasing them, hoping they would one day survive and reproduce on their own. Now, that hope had become reality. The young snakes were not just surviving, they were thriving. They were hunting, growing, and reproducing without human help. It was as if a long-lost guardian of the ecosystem had finally returned home. With more sightings reported, optimism began to spread among researchers. Adult indigo snakes moved confidently through recovering forests, and areas once thought to be lifeless began to show signs of activity again. For the first time in a long while, Florida's wild landscape no longer felt completely lost. Slowly, quietly, the Everglades were breathing again. So, how did the whole attempt end? Was it a success or a failure like many expected? Let's talk about the lesson hidden inside Florida's wildest experiment. Nature reclaims balance. In the end, what surprised the world most was not that eastern indigo snakes were able to kill Burmese pythons. It was the fact that patience, careful science, and long-term ecological restoration actually worked in real life, not just in theory. For many years, People believed Florida's natural system was too damaged to ever recover. The idea of adding more snakes into an area already filled with invasive predators sounded strange, even foolish, to many observers. Scientists saw a deeper truth. Ecosystems can't be fixed with one solution. Hunting alone or technology like drones and traps isn't enough. Only combined, coordinated efforts can restore Florida's disrupted ecological balance. Florida eventually realized that real recovery required rebuilding the ecosystem itself. This meant restoring habitats, protecting native predators, and supporting biodiversity so that the system could begin to heal naturally. Species that once kept nature in balance were slowly brought back where possible. These living roles were important long before human disruption changed the land. The eastern indigo snake became a powerful symbol of this effort. It could not remove every python in Florida, but it changed the balance in important ways. It created competition for space and food. It pressured younger pythons and reclaimed areas that had become unsafe for native wildlife. More importantly, it showed scientists that strong ecosystems can defend themselves when given a chance. There was a strong irony in the whole situation. People mocked Florida for releasing more snakes, while at the same time praising hunters who removed pythons. Yet both groups were actually working toward the same goal: saving the Everglades. One side focused on direct removal and destruction. The other focused on restoring balance and rebuilding natural systems. Together, both efforts slowly began to produce results that once seemed impossible. They gave the Everglades a real chance to recover. The battle is not finished, but progress is now visible in many areas. Burmese pythons are still spreading in parts of Florida. Other threats, like parasites and habitat loss, continue to challenge wildlife. Many ecosystems remain fragile and under pressure, but now there is hope where there was once only doubt. In restored wetlands and quiet forests, life is returning slowly but steadily. Eastern indigo snakes move again through sandy burrows and tall grass. Native animals like bobcats and birds are adapting and surviving in the changing landscape. The wilderness of Florida is no longer silent in defeat. It is responding, resisting, and slowly rebuilding its natural strength. And perhaps the most important lesson is this: nature is far more resilient than humans often believe, but only if people are willing to help restore the balance that was once lost. Recovery depends on patience and care. So, what do you think about Florida's solution? Do you think it will stand the test of time? We'd love to hear your opinions in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe.